I'm Myra.
And I'm Danica, and this is Black Women Healing Podcast. And on this podcast, you can join us every Monday where we have raw, relatable conversations about mental wellness.
And we push you to do the work.
Let's heal. This is Black Women Healing Podcast.
Hey y'all, we're back with another episode of Black Women Healing Podcast. And y'all know lately we've been doing a this or that. And in the name of pop culture and hip hop, who y'all got between Kendrick or Drake? That's a duh, Danica. Of course, that was easy for me to come up with.
I don't know why I didn't think of that. Look, I was just talking to my little boo about this, and I'm gonna go with Kendrick. Like even before these last little two, I was already like Kendrick. Like what are we talking about here? And for me, it's just more so I just feel like Kendrick represents like Black culture. He represents like an MC. He just represents so many different things. I think Drake did his best, and I think he did good. But come on, I choose Kendrick. So that's what I'm thinking. What y'all thinking?
I definitely think Kendrick too, especially with the latest song that he did with DJ Mustard. Like I don't know if you've been seeing all the videos, and they're like, made a song where anybody could dance to this. Like, yeah, that just like made my day, especially like being from LA. I feel like it speaks so much to that. Dr. Ebony, what you thinking?
Kendrick. I love Drake. Okay, I like Drake. Drake got some issues, but I like him. Kendrick did his homework. Kendrick is an intellect. Kendrick was thinking. He wasn't just talking. Like and I love intention. I love people who are intentional. And he's super intentional in what he's saying, and he took some time. Yes. You can tell.
Yeah. We love you too, Drake. We love you too, Drake. But Kendrick got this.
Yeah.
Y'all are funny. So we have a special guest today, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. Dr. Ebony is passionate about helping women survivors through trauma recovery. She is specifically trained to work with a variety of clients with issues related to depression, anxiety, and other stress responses. Dr. Ebony also specializes in guiding women to develop their skills that increase their effectiveness in interpersonal interactions, including communication and asking for as getting what they want and need. Dr. Ebony is specifically interested in issues that impact marginalized communities, including minority women and LGBT persons. Given the extensive amount of attention placed on body size and dieting in our society, Dr. Ebony understands how these pressures can impact one's relationship with food and their bodies. Thus, Dr. Ebony is passionate about helping others recover from diet culture while also learning to shape their health in a more empowered manner. Dr. Ebony has combined her expertise and own experiences to form a coaching platform geared towards helping other women gain control of their health by learning to build a healthier relationship with food in ways that leave them feeling in control, empowered, and healthy, no matter their body size. Dr. Ebony uses her training and expertise in the world of psychology, food relationship, and mindset strategist. Host of Food is Not Bae podcast and author of the book Food is Not Bae. So, Dr. Ebony, to get us started, how did your idea of creating my therapy cards even come into fruition?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank y'all for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my therapy cards came into fruition. It was an idea that kind of hit me in 2019. I really wanted to figure out a way where people who couldn't access therapy or couldn't talk to me, how they could basically, how can I make myself more available to people without being the person that they talk to? Because a lot of people don't know, if you find a therapist online, say that you run across their TikTok or Instagram, and you're like, I want to work with her, I want to work with him, I want to work with them, you actually can if y'all don't live in the same state that person is licensed in. So a lot of people come up against that and it's like, oh, well, dang, nobody lives here who looks like me. So I wanted to kind of really make myself more available to people who geographical limitations. And then therapy is expensive, right? So everybody can't pay the price that we're asking them to pay. So I wanted it to be more affordable. I didn't want all these barriers to keep us out. So I took the questions that I asked in therapy, and in 2019, I was like, should I do an ebook? Should I do a book? What should I do? And then one day it just hit me. You could just make a card deck. It was like literally that plain, like just put them in a card deck. So I took the questions that I asked in therapy that come up the most, and I put them in a card deck. And that's how my therapy cards came about.
Ah, that is so
Yeah.
cool. Have you found that in talking with like the clients that you get that they still use the cards outside of therapy even though they work with you?
They do, and they're like, "Oh my God!" I'm telling my friends about them, and because these are general questions, right? So the more we work together, and the more I learn about you, and so other questions are going to come up. But those questions that I know I'm asking everybody that comes in, those are some of the general questions. And then as the decks have progressed, so we started out with women, and then we had teens, and then men, and then couples. So as these decks have progressed, and as we've learned more, they have more specific questions than the other decks too. But the women's deck started out general questions, and then we did a second edition of that have more specific questions. But people actually still use the cards even though we are in therapy, because they use them between therapy for, like, some insight work or some journaling, or they'll use them with their family or on a road trip or with their homegirls at brunch or at the barbershop. People use them, so wherever. But they still use them because other people can answer the questions too.
Yes, yeah, no, I love this, and I love that you took the idea and you made it happen. You was like, you
Yeah.
know what, I'm about to help. I'm about to help everybody. um, so, like you was just talking about, you have all these different like series of the cards, right? So, just from my like small research, I know it's like the adult men, women. Like you said, you have the second edition, the general one, teen edition, and it's a romantic relationship edition as well. Am I missing any of the other ones?
Those are the four. So those are the four that we have. So the only one that we've iterated again is the women's second edition, because that was our very first one. And so as I created the other decks, I was like, I want to put some more questions in the women's deck. Like, this got to be a little bit more specific. So we have a second edition of that one, but the other ones, yeah. So it's just four right now.
Wow, yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Thank
I
you.
was wondering, like, can you give us a small breakdown of like the differences between each set of cards?
Yes. Yes. So the women is completely tailored towards just kind of like anybody can use these. Let me just say that. It doesn't matter if you are what you identify as. It doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or not. They're general enough for everybody to use them. But what I'm being more intentional about is the representation that exists in the art, in the graphics. And so I want Black women to see themselves represented in the graphic on that. And I want us to have a deck for ourselves. Now, so those are going to be general questions like, what do you need to forgive yourself for? What advice would you give your younger self, or what do you want your future self to know? What habits are you still engaging in that's causing problems for you? So it's really helping what's getting in the way of you saying no. So those questions are in the women's deck. And then when you go to the teens, they're more related to the age group. So what are your peers doing that is influencing you? What would you like to say to your parents that you haven't said? Or how is social media influencing the way that you think about yourself? So tailoring the questions to what they would likely experience. So when you get to the men deck, we do ask questions around, how does it feel when you see bodies like yours being harmed? Or what did you learn about being a man? And what do you feel like, what keeps you from showing your emotions, or what keeps you, when you act out, what emotion is that connected to? So some of those experiences that men typically have that they may not be able to put words to, or may not feel like they can put words to, so giving them permission to do that. And then in the relationship, we're asking questions about intimacy. We're asking questions about people's sex narratives. What did you learn about sex that you're bringing into the relationship? What versions of you are showing up when you're arguing with each other, or in arguments or disagreements? What do you want to put to rest that you don't want to bring up again? So those common things that come up in couples therapy too, that people keep rehashing, so we put those there. So even though each deck contains some of the same questions, there are going to be questions in each deck that's tailored to people's specific experience in that demographic.
That was a great breakdown. That was good. No, like, I mean, I love that how you started off with saying that it's for everybody, just because I feel like it's the same for our podcast. Like, people hear Black Women Healing Podcast and they're like, okay, it's only for Black women. Anybody can listen to any of these episodes and get something from them, but it is targeted, and it's like, this was created for Black women though, right? And so I love that you pointed that out. I was just thinking, and I know this is off our questions, but being like a food relationship strategist, are you going to create a card for like specifically like food therapy? I don't even know what to call it,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah. Yeah. So believe it or not, that one, so when I got the idea, I was going to be a therapy deck and it was going to be a food relationship deck. This was 2019. The food relationship deck was supposed to come out first, and then the
Oh,
pandemic happened. And
oh,
then the therapy cards were needed the most. Nobody was caring about what people ate during the pandemic. We were all trying to survive, trying to keep our heads. So
true.
I was like, you know what? We're going to put the therapy deck out first. And from that, it just took a life of its own. And the food relationship stuff just kind of took a back seat. But I still do want to create a deck for our food relationship. I think it's so needed.
I
Um, I think it's so needed, but yeah, that was supposed to be first. So it's coming. Just not yet, but
okay.
it's coming.
Okay. Yeah, no, it does make sense too. Yeah, I agree. During the pandemic, the priority for sure was everybody's mental wellness.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
so what's been your favorite reviews? I'm pretty sure you get a lot of different people's comments and been like, these are helpful or whatever the comments may be. What have been your favorite reviews customers have given about my therapy cards?
Yeah, I love when people say, "Oh my God, I told my therapist about them." I just love that. So people will come to social media and they're like, "Okay, I told my therapist about him," or a therapist will come and say, "A client told me about him." I think the ones that stick out to me the most are those, but also amongst my peers, other therapists who use them and seek them out for help in their practice too. Because sometimes as therapists, we'll be in session and sometimes you'll have some clients who will talk, and then you have those clients who are a little bit more reserved, may not know exactly what to say, or know exactly how to bring out what it is they're thinking. So the cards actually help to move conversations along. And so to hear therapists say, "I use this in my session to help guide my work," that is everything, because we use books, coming in training, we use manuals, a CBT manual, this manual, that manual, to kind of like see what we're supposed to do with clients. But to hear people say, "I'm choosing your cards to help work with this specific client because it helps to move the conversation along," it's like the thing that I wanted, because I come in from grad school and I wanted to go an unconventional route to being an author. I knew that I wanted to be an author and things like that, but I didn't want to write a research-based book or anything like that. I didn't want to do a bunch of research. But to have people use this as a reference is exactly what I wanted. So it's my body of work that people are using, and that I can contribute to the field when people are working with people who look like us. And so that makes me so excited, because it's a point of reference, and it's a guide for people doing this work, and people have something they can turn to kind of help people get where they want to go, and to be able to contribute to that means everything.
Yes, that is beautiful. So let's talk about Dr. Ebony. When you think about your own life, are there any cards that you notice that you gravitate to or use the most in your own life? Let's get into the tea.
Yeah, let's get into the tea. And I'm gonna tell y'all, when I created the questions, right? I came up with the questions. I have a focus group to help vet the questions. So each deck iteration, I bring therapists in and we go through the questions to see if they fit, other experts in these areas to see, because I can't know everything, right?
Yeah.
So I bring them in, see if the questions fit. I know all the questions, but I sat down to do them a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, with my ex, and I was like, you know what? I don't actually want to do this work right now. This is too much. This is a
Mm,
little too much. So the questions are actually real questions that get you to do the real work. So there's been plenty of times that I would have to pull a card and I have to just sit with it and say, you know what, I'm just going to come back to that. What I
yeah.
love about the cards is that you can use them based on whatever's going on in your life. So if you got parent issues, you can pull a card. That same card can be used if you got friendship issues. So you can always use it depending on the context. My favorite deck is always the newest deck, because I feel like it's the most evolved deck.
Mm,
So the relationship, the men's deck was actually my favorite deck. That's the deck that I would work from a lot, and I would journal from the men's deck, because I felt like those questions had evolved from the first deck. And it was like, well, what do you, so if the question says, what did you learn about being a man, I just switched it. What did you learn about being a woman? What did you learn about like expressing your emotions and things like that, because we still got those same messages too, right? So now the relationship deck is my favorite deck, because I love relationship work. And I feel like Iyanla Vanzant said that relationships are like a mirror. It shows you who you are, and it shows you all the work that still needs to be done. So tapping into the relationship version of yourself, because you can think you fine. I see Danica looking like you can think you're fine, and then you get in a relationship and then you just see just how fine you're not. And you're like, oh, I still got to do some work right here. Yeah. So I think that the relationship deck brings out some of the things that some of my shadows that I still need to work on, and that
Yeah.
still needs to kind of like develop and improve and kind of be held accountable. So right now, those questions are my favorite.
Do you see yourself like, I don't know if you're in a relationship now, I know you mentioned your ex, but do you see yourself going, if you're going to enter into a new relationship, do you see yourself introducing the cards to your partner? And how would you even like do that? Like, do you say, I made this thing, or like, do you just present it? Like, how do you even do that?
So I'm dating now, and I don't mind saying, I say it on social media, but I'm dating, and I've given the deck to a number of people. I mean, I'm still single, so that may be, they may not particularly like it, but I definitely like, hey, I don't tell people, I don't ever meet people. Let me be honest, I don't ever meet people and say, this is who I am, this is what I do. People who I'm dating only really find out what I do if they ask me for my Instagram. If they don't ask me for my Instagram, I never talk about what I do. The most I'll say is that I'm a therapist. I leave it alone. Because I don't want to be a therapist in a relationship. I don't want to therapize anybody. I don't want anybody thinking that I'm trying to read their minds. I don't want anybody to think that that's what this is about to be. And I don't want them coming to me for the work that they need to do with somebody else. Right. So I just don't say much. So when they go on Instagram, some of my clients don't even know about the cards, to be quite honest. So they'll find me and then they'll say, why you didn't tell me you had cards? So I just don't promote them in that way. I mean, that's just my ethic and value around that. So then in dating, I have sent the cards to some people. You know what? I do foresee myself doing these questions with people. And I use other people's cards, I'm not gonna lie. I use other people's cards too, to actually ask questions too. I know Dr. Jack, she has some sex formation cards. I use those cards to come to kind of ask questions too in relationships. So I think, yeah, we're definitely gonna use the cards. I use the women's deck with my friends. We had a Galentine's. I used those questions with my friends, and then I haven't used it with my family yet. But one of these holidays, I'll bring them so we can do some chit chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will bring the cards up if
Yeah.
once we get there.
Yeah. And then I'm also curious when we talk about this men's deck, oftentimes I come across the client who is really struggling with trying to balance what it looks like to honor their feminine side and their masculine side. And as you were sharing some of the questions from the men's card, I'm like, I see a lot of my women clients who maybe should try out those cards. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, any advice for someone who's like, I'm really like on this masculine side and I want to soften that a little bit, or I feel like really in tune with my feminine side, I want to, delve into my masculine side. Any thoughts about like what card deck they should maybe purchase, or does it look like both? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that I would definitely say the men's deck and the women's deck, especially the newest edition, would work for that. I want to preface this by saying women, I'll speak for myself and the people that I know and who I've had conversations with. Women, we all have these masculine and feminine sides, right? Women don't necessarily want to reside in the masculine all the time. Sometimes that's a place we feel like we have to be out of survival. Part of resting in the feminine side means that we have to feel safe. We have to feel emotionally protected. We have to feel emotionally like safe with the person that we're expressing. We have to feel vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, you have to feel that sense of safety and security. You have to trust, right? So a lot of that has to be in place. So I know I said the women and the men, but if they're in a relationship and they're wanting to actually let go of some of that masculine energy and things like that, the relationship deck is going to be that, because something in the relationship is not safe enough for them to rest in that. Something is making them still feel like they have to show up taking care of everything, right? Or show up the ways that they've always shown up because of survival and needing to take care of themselves. So the couple needs to do work around creating safety. And there's actually a question. There's like, how is the couple making room for each person to grow? And how is the couple making room for each person to experience vulnerability? So if you're in a relationship, I think that's helpful. If you are a person who's just single, you want to learn more about yourself, or if you want to learn about yourself, more about yourself in general, I do think the men and women deck gives you some of those, like gives you enough questions that you can begin to tap into. But a lot of that is going to come from trusting. And if you're too feminine, you need to learn how to take care of things, or you need to kind of like step it up a little bit, be more assertive, kind of advocate for yourself and things like that. That's going to come from the women's deck too, because there are questions in there like boundaries, saying no, letting go of old habits that no longer work, like being passive and things like that. So that would be helpful for that.
Yes, thank you for breaking that down. And so the anniversary of my therapy cards is when, Dr. Ebony?
May 20th.
May
That's my
20th.
birthday. May 20th. So we'll be 4. We will be
Yes.
4. Yeah, we'll be 4. Look at me counting. We'll be 4. We will be
So
4.
tell us, in honor of your anniversary and maybe your birthday too, what are your hopes for the future of my therapy cards and maybe
Oh,
intention for the
yeah.
next year?
Well, what I envision is next year for the 5 year, we're going to have something in person. We're going to have a birthday party for my therapy cards. It's going to be like, think album release something, but it's going to be a showcase of my therapy cards, and I cannot wait. So I foresee that the future of this, I do foresee digitizing my therapy cards, and creating an app for folks, and helping people kind of like feeling more of a guide and support, so people can get those daily affirmations, so people can get those, that community aspect of it, or get those tasks per week that they can do that they may want to do outside of the car. So it's just going to be more comprehensive and more work. So if you've been to, therapy, and know how therapists ask follow-up questions, so they can ask one question, and then based on the way that you answer, you got all these different branches that come off. So I'm hoping to add that when we digitize, just to be able to give people some follow-up questions to really be able to sit with the work and do the work. So that's what I see for us. I see us going digital. So we'll see what happens. People asked for it in 2020 and 2021, but I wasn't ready for it to be digitized, and I just didn't want to put anything out there. So now that I have a model for what I want it to look like, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And then I see us honestly moving a little bit more from consumer driven to more, I want organizations to purchase these cars for people. I want companies to purchase
Yeah.
these cars for people. I want them to be available way more than what they are. And I don't want cost to ever be a barrier to folks ever getting these. I really want to partner with organizations that can be able to provide these to people on a larger scale.
I love that. As we wrap up, I have to ask you, how do you juggle my therapy cards, being a therapist, now you dating, friendship stuff? Every time we talk to you in a different city. So can you tell us how you do it all? Like, we need to know for ourselves and for the people listening, maybe, but for myself, I need to know, how are you juggling all this and balancing? What does this look like?
Sometimes it's a beautiful mess. I'm not gonna even lie. Sometimes it's a beautiful mess. Sometimes I hold it together, and sometimes, like today, Alexis has to remind me, "You got a podcast at 12." I said, "Oh." I'm not gonna even lie. I knew it on Friday, but Sunday came around real fast, and I was like, "Whoa, okay." So having a team.
Yeah.
So a team and accountability. If it was left up to me, managing my own calendar, it would be way more chaotic than it is now. So learning to delegate, which is super hard for me to do, but learning to delegate and letting people do and operate in their zone of genius that they do helps to keep me and keep it in line. That's the good side of it. Sometimes it is me just feeling like I'm moving from appointment to appointment to appointment, to thing to thing to thing. So what I've learned to do is to say, I'm just going to take today for what it is and move through this day hour by hour. If I have 8 appointments, I'm not going to look at all 8. I'm going to look at one at a time, and I'm going to be present one at a time. And if Friday I have to travel, I worry about Friday, Thursday night, and get my life together and then go. So sometimes it's just that. Sometimes I'm able to be more intentional. Like, I take a break, intentionally take a week off in May. I intentionally take some time off in January. This time it was in February, but I intentionally take time off to reset and regroup. And so that helps get me back into the flow of things too. But it does get a little messy sometimes, but we pull it all together. And you can't do everything. So I'm in the season now, to be quite honest, where my therapy cards is really running on autopilot. It's just doing its thing. This is a clinical season for me, so I'm showing up more clinically, and my therapy cards is just doing what they do in the background. Last year it was switched. My therapy cards is what I was showing up with so much more, and then clinical kind of took a back seat. I'm learning to lean into the season as it's presenting to me, rather than making it what I want it to be. It's a clinical season, so I'm leaning into the clinical season, and then my therapy cards is just growing and doing what it needs to do in the background, and that to me is a blessing, because I've created something that I don't have to do a whole bunch of work around, that still kind of goes, and that's a blessing. So that helps me kind of keep things moving too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Those are really good ways to juggle things. Like I mean, especially the tidbit about the present moment piece. Like I love that. Of like sometimes when we think of everything, that's when it feels like too overwhelming. Versus like, nope, I'm not thinking about all eight of those. I'm only going to think about this one. Or like you said, leaning into whatever the season is, because sometimes we're like, no, 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 I want this to happen like this. When it's like, oh, actually, this is how the universe is presenting this to you. So why don't you go along with that? Because that's probably what's supposed to be happening right now. So, oh, I love this. I mean, I love talking to you. I know Myra has. By the way, Myra most definitely she knew everything about you already. I was like, wait, what is this? She was like, you haven't heard of this? Like, where you been at? I'm like, I haven't. I'm sorry, I haven't. But I already know Myra's love talking to you. But at the end of our podcast, we always do like takeaways for our listeners. This could be anything you want to leave our audience with. What would you say the takeaway for today's episode would be?
Yes, I love talking to y'all too. Thank you. So I want people to think about the thing that they need to forgive themselves for, and really sit with that, process that, and do the forgiveness work. I think that too many times we keep ourselves on the hook for things that we've done, or things that we feel embarrassed or ashamed about, and we keep beating ourselves up over and over and over again about that thing. We've already paid for it. You've already paid for it. It's time to do the work around letting it go. So those things that we keep blaming ourselves for, I really want people to do the forgiveness work on themselves. It's really easy to forgive other people sometimes, but forgiving yourself is the work that we don't do enough of. So I really want people to take some time to really think about what that looks like for them, and to really see in moving forward, they can do that work of letting themselves off the hook for whatever they're continuing to beat themselves up about.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ebony, and thank you for joining us today. I didn't
Thank
have
y'all
no
for
words
having
at
me.
first. That's why I was like, what do I say? I was letting that marinate a little bit. So I hope y'all take that in and that you enjoyed this week's episode. We thank you again. Anything else you want to share about your anniversary as we wrap up? Are we good?
Well, just I encourage people just to go to mytherapycards.shop, check out the cards. We do have journals that go with the cards to help you guide, that helps to guide the processing. If you want to connect, I'm on Instagram, Dr. Ebony Online. I'm on TikTok, Dr. Ebony. And so if there's anything that you feel like you have a question about, or something that you want to know more about, I'm always talking to the people. So feel free to reach out.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Ebony.
You're
Thank
welcome. Thank
you.
y'all. Thank y'all.